Is a change finally happening at quarterback for the Iowa football team? Kirk Ferentz with some interesting comments today at the weekly Iowa football press conference. We break it all down today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you're on the audio side, 5-star reviews helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the weekly press conference happened today. Kirk Ferentz in front of the assembled media in Iowa City. Iowa coming on the heels of one of their worst losses in a long time. And it's not the final score that is indicative of that. Losing to a rebuilding Michigan State team, losing in the fashion that they did. Offense, a no-show in the first half. Defense is poor, as we've seen in a really long time. It was overall a house of horrors up in East Lansing for Iowa over the weekend. And what many people have been clamoring for, even before the season began, is a change at quarterback. After the season a year ago from Cade McNamara, what we saw from him in the early going, it wasn't good. We knew he was injured. He was playing through that quad injury that was much more substantial than many people were led to believe early in the season. He was absolutely damaged at that time before eventually tearing his ACL in the home game a year ago against Michigan State. But this has been a quarterback controversy that has been happening for a long time at Iowa. And the frustrations continue to bubble up and build up within the fan base. It's different than it was a year ago, when your backup quarterback was Deacon Hill, a guy that, because of injury, we saw out there that wasn't good enough. Did not have the talent to be playing at this level. He did not have the ability to be a Big Ten quarterback. You saw that. And nice guy aside, Cade McNamara, I'm sure, is a great kid, but come on. We're talking about big boy football here. This is Big Ten football. And now this is Big Ten football that also comes with NIL, pay for play. This is a new reality. And with it, the pressure ramps up. That's the reality. And we talk about reality here on Locked On Hawkeyes. That's what we like to live in, not the fantasy world that some people try to paint. No, let's live in the real world. And the real world is that Cade McNamara has not been good enough for this Iowa football team. This is a year that came in with big-time expectations. This is going to be Iowa's best chance to be a college football playoff path for the foreseeable future. A schedule that sets up incredibly well, coupled with a team that returned 19 starters from a year ago. And they're 4-3. And they're 4-3 for a myriad of different reasons. The defense has been a huge disappointment. The kicking game has not been what it's been in the past. We see, again, another missed kick from Drew Stevens. The punting game doesn't have an all-world punter in Torrey Taylor, and on and on and on. But eventually it comes back to the most important position in all of sport. How many times do we have to say it? And we all know it's true. Yes, they're the one that gets the notoriety. Sometimes they get too much credit when things are going well, but when things are going poorly, a lot of the fingers go there. Normally, we've heard Kirk Ferentz. And as I've said before, everydayers, you know the term, Kirk Ferentz's brain is broken by quarterback change. It just is. We have seen too many years now of his inability to make a change when everybody else can see that a change needs to happen. Well, his comments today paint a different type of picture. Certainly different than we saw a year ago with the early struggles of Cade McNamara, going back in the Spencer Petras era, him and Alex Padilla. Different than even Jake Rudock, CJ Beathard, or Jake Christensen, Ricky Stanzi. These are different types of comments that are coming from Kirk Ferentz, and gives me the belief that a change is very close to happening. Now, we also have to realize that Brendan Sullivan, the backup quarterback, coming in for Northwestern, though he had a couple of good games at Northwestern, they weren't all rosy. There were also some duds in there too. And Brendan Sullivan was the easy answer. He would be the quarterback. If there was not the gap that there appears to be, we would have seen him already, but that's not the case. What you do get with Brendan Sullivan, though, is a guy that can move. that has athletic ability. And there's a reason that they continue to install him as that quarterback inside the 10-yard line, and now possibly even in short yardage situations, because he can move. And Cade McNamara at this point in his career can't. Yeah, he can move. But we're talking about a guy closer to the statuesque quarterback as opposed to a tuck and runner. That's what you're going to get with Brendan Sullivan. And even if Cade McNamara is more consistent throwing the football, and I believe from everything that I've heard, that is the case, he's not great at it. This is not the guy we saw at Michigan. This is not the guy that he was before the injuries. And because of all that, the leash has to be short. And it feels like, reading between the lines, and that's another thing you have to do with Kirk Ferentz. He's not going to come out and say things. He's not going to throw guys under the bus. That's not what he does. That's not how this program is built. That's not going to happen. But the question comes out about this. First, he said this. I think they're both doing a good job at practice. That's important. It shouldn't be, I know, in many people's eyes, but it's important to Kirk Ferentz. And when he says that both guys are practicing well, take it at the surface level and run with that. We go back to some of those quarterback controversies that we've talked about in the past, and that's something that he didn't always say. Now, the former offensive coordinator, what's the upside, right? What it was between Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla. What's the upside? The upside here is a quarterback that can move, a quarterback that maybe can make the makeables. And that's been the biggest issue with Cade McNamara, is the makeable plays that have been there, he's been missing. He's not a good enough quarterback to afford that. He can't make enough plays down the field to be missing on the throws that are there. 0 for 5 and third down in the first half. I think it was close to happening against Michigan State. And if that first drive of the second half didn't go the way that it did, I think we'd be having a different conversation today. Alas, here we are once again. I believe that the leash is short. And reading through these comments or reading what Kirk Ferentz had to say today, I think this says a whole lot. When he says that Cade has to play better, certainly the first half in particular. Really, nothing on offense was good enough for us to be. We dug a hole that was too deep, quite frankly, and everybody had a hand in it. But the offense certainly has a responsibility. That's as close to Kirk Ferentz throwing somebody under the bus as you're going to find, because it's not what he does. We're not talking Steve Alford here, right? We're talking about Kirk Ferentz. Two guys that could be polar opposites of the way that they run programs. We knew Steve Alford, it was never his fault. It was always the players throwing him under the bus. And at times it went too far. That's not Kirk Ferentz. Because Kirk Ferentz is a good person, as opposed to the guy I just mentioned. Kirk Ferentz is. Even with a broken brain as it pertains to quarterbacks. But he sees what we all see. And we know what's going to happen Saturday afternoon. If Cade McNamara struggles, the Boo Birds are going to be intense. You thought it was bad after that 3-and-out to begin the Washington game? Look out. They go 3-and-out against Northwestern in the first drive. It is going to be loud inside Kinnick Stadium. And it's not going to be cheering. And it's not trying to lift up Cade McNamara. It is going to be anger. You will hear it. It will be there, and it will be substantial. This is a fan base on edge. This is a fan base that understands the opportunity lost with this season and the future of this program and how concerning it is. As we talked about in yesterday's show, the future of Iowa football, there's some scary things. What I do believe is a change is as close as it's been in a long time. And if Cade McNamara does not play well, they got some big problems. Scott Dochterman from The Athletic covers the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Big Ten. We'll talk a little Big Ten football with Doc and, of course, get into Iowa. What's going wrong in his mind? We'll get the conversation with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Always enjoy that one. Plus, we got a little more coming up for you today. An updated look at the Iowa football stats. Well, we know the offense isn't great. The numbers are even more concerning, I believe, on the defensive side of the football. We'll do that as we continue. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by Roy. Hey, Hawkeye fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we've pooled over $20,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can directly support the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to a specific player. you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going. You even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part? It's risk-free. If the athlete transfers, doesn't deliver the content, you get your money back. This week, I'm supporting Reese Vanderzee. I just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me. Even $10 makes a difference. Let's show Reese Vanderzee the love and keep him connected to our school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, and enter the referral code LOCKEDON, and you're entered. Already on Roy? Any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered in automatically. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Download Roy today and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Roy _ return on you for more information. Roy, support the players, change the game.
Dochterman joins us. He had a busy Big Ten weekend, started watching Oregon dismantle Purdue, then took out another. But Doc, come to think of it, you saw a couple of stinkers at the end of the day, and then got home and watched Iowa as they stunk up the joint at East Lansing. How are you, Scott Dochterman?
I'm good. You know what? I saw 2 games that were a combined score of 91-7, and there were no field goals.
Jeez.
So that, I guess that was a little bit different than the game in East Lansing. So yeah, it was 2 different games that I was at, no question. I mean, the atmospheres were great in both spots. Oregon kind of went through the motions, I thought, and won comfortably, whereas I thought Indiana really, had a statement win.
No, by the sounds of things. So was it more this Nebraska just not ready for, just going back to Nebraska like they've been over the last, better part of almost a decade now? Or, is Indiana truly this good, Doc?
Indiana's truly that good.
Wow.
I know people are looking at their schedule and looking at them and saying they haven't played anybody. They're this. Oh, Nebraska's not that good. They are that good. And now Curtis Work is out for an undetermined amount of time after ripping the thumbnail off of his thumb. And I don't know if, must have done something more to it because he's definitely out this week. But they are legitimate. The passes, the execution in the passing game, the crispness in which they attacked. Nebraska made a lot of mistakes on defense, and it's particularly
special teams.
Overrunning. Yeah, but overrunning lanes, allowing running backs to cut back and do some good things there. But the passing game is crisp and efficient and well put together, and the defense plays really well. I mean, they may not have a superstar, but they have a lot of really good players, and they play it really well. So I think Indiana is terrific. They are clearly in the top 4 in the Big Ten, and they're not number 4 for me.
That's
interesting.
No doubt. Now, the likelihood that this is going to happen is incredibly, incredibly small, but there is a path where Penn State, Oregon, and Indiana are undefeated, and one doesn't get to go to the championship game. We've talked about tiebreakers in the past and 5 teams tied at 7-2 for that second spot. That's going to be a mess. This is a mess, though, of epic proportions if we get that.
Oh, sure. But it's way too early to determine tiebreakers just because we don't know. It goes down kind of the list on who, which teams, which team's number 4 and how does that kind of pan out as to who plays who and what. And we don't know who's going to rise and who's going to fall. But, I guess right now I would look at they all are good. They all are really, I think there's 4, maybe 5 teams that are competitive for the playoffs. I think Illinois should be in that category as well. And, but right now, all 3 could win out, but I would, caution any of you who bet on that from happening unless you lay $1 and you get back 100,000. Because I think Ohio State's going to pick off at least one of those teams.
Yeah, seemingly so. Well, Doc, let's get to Iowa again. You weren't there. You watched it like we did on television. I think I don't want to put words in Trent's mouth. We knew Cade McNamara had been struggling all year, so we're kind of used to that. But the 5-alarm fire, at least after this past Saturday night, was the defense and the missed tackles, and one side of the field. Hall's side of the field, or Nestor when he's in there for Hall. It's that second cornerback. We haven't seen a Phil Parker defense play as poorly collectively as they did on Saturday night in a long, long time, Doc.
True. They had a lot of missed tackles. I thought that some of their weaknesses have been exposed. I've been on this banging this drum for a long time that I just don't see enough out of the edge. And they just aren't, and a combination of getting, blocked down on, and which allowed a lot of runs, but also just, not enough pass rush from the edge. But also the second cornerback has not been great. Now I'll say this: Nick Marsh is fantastic.
He really is. Yeah.
He's like Keon Coleman was a few years ago before he transferred to Florida State. But that said, you've got to do a better job. And whether it's Hall, I mean, it's kind of like what it was on that position, like in 2017, where they were going through Manny Rugamba and Michael Ojemudia, and then ended up with Matt Hankins. So they still had some pretty good players there. It's just, I think they're still young and inexperienced and struggling with how to play that position. But the defense, the way they did not stop the run, that was the biggest surprise for me. That was a whole scale breakdown of which I haven't seen for a while from Iowa, since maybe Penn State in 16, when they gave up almost 600 yards there. But I didn't see Saquon Barkley out there either. So, I think this is it's a wake up moment for this team. We said it a few weeks ago with Ohio State, but I think this is more truly a wake up, because you can kind of rationalize Ohio State by saying, well, they're just better than everybody else and they're going to beat everybody like that and move on. But with Michigan State, this is a team that's really in flux. It's a lot of change in East Lansing, a lot of talent. I thought Aiden Childs played not even close his best game ever, but Iowa now has a lot of reflection to do from the number of missed tackles to being blown off the ball out of position. I thought some of the safeties played really well, though. I get overshadowed, but Xavier Wampa played. If the Washington game was his best game, this was number 2, and it might be flipped. And I thought Brent Schulte was pretty decent too, but overall, not a very consistent effort for that defense. And I'm sure that's one that the film session was probably. I'm sure the paint has come off the wall.
Doc, talking to you throughout the years, listening to you on other podcasts that you do, I know you get annoyed at times with the Iowa fan base, just the wild fluctuations that are there. We're back to, all right, Kirk needs to go, completely tear this thing down, and not seeing the big picture. After a performance like Saturday night, sometimes it is hard to see the big picture just getting run off the field by a pretty average Michigan State team. But I know you like to bring up that Iowa, boy, they're in a spot that a lot of college programs certainly would be able to trade to, but we're also talking about a coach that's 69. As you look forward with this program, what's still to come? A different roster that is going to be completely rebuilt, need to be completely rebuilt for next season, a much more difficult schedule. What do you see as you look into your crystal ball here the next couple of years?
I mean, next year, it looks like a rebuilding year, but I'd also caution people to get too crazy there, because you look at what I saw in person in Indiana and then what everybody saw against Michigan State and how quickly it can be rebuilt, that it's not just it's not a 3-year type window or anything. And Iowa does go into the portal. Iowa doesn't ignore the portal. Look at their top 2 quarterbacks and that sort of thing. What I would say is that this one was the more disappointing loss that I've seen in a while, because last year the losses were to teams that were better than you. And this year, Iowa State was a coin flip game. We knew it, and it came down to that. And then Ohio State, you knew they were better than you, and it came down to it. This was a game where every single statistic said Iowa is the better team. That Michigan State could not run the football, that they were 90th in penalties. Their turnover margin was like 118th in the country. All the areas where Iowa excels, Michigan State fails in. So this should be like turn the ball over a couple of times, get a penalty. And instead it was just, they dominated the line of scrimmage. And so that was really I think that is an eye-jarring moment for Iowa. It doesn't mean that they're a bad program, and I think the wild overreactions are kind of uniquely to Iowa's fan base, that they aren't the same to everybody else. But overall, I can understand the frustration, and some of the issues just seem to be over and over and over again, and the reluctance to make any kind of changes is probably what frustrates people the most. I think in the future, depending on what happens at quarterback, Iowa's still going to be okay. If Iowa decides, well, we're just going to stay what we got now, well, if what you got now isn't good enough now, how's it going to be better next year? Yeah. So I think that's a question I have, is if they decide, well, Brendan Sullivan's our guy next year, well, he should be your guy now. Otherwise, go out to the portal and get somebody who's your guy.
Doc, you certainly know Kirk Ferentz, being in all the press conferences, et cetera, over the years and having one-on-one interviews, a lot better than Trent and I. Do you think at all the College Football Hall of Fame comes into his mind when he's determining how much longer he wants to do this? Because he should get to that 60% threshold this year. But next year, if it does, I mean, they're going to lose all that talent, and Higgins is playing at an all-world level. He's going to be gone. There's going to be a whole bunch of guys that move on from this program. Do you think that pops into his mind ultimately whenever the time comes for him to make that decision?
I don't know, and he wouldn't ever say that. I don't know if that's something that, and I don't know that he would tell anybody, not even his wife. That's an issue for him, because I'm sure he wants to be recognized and he deserves it.
Absolutely does, yes.
It would be really an embarrassment upon the Hall of Fame if it's if Kirk's at 59.8 or 9%, and all of a sudden, oh, by the way, yeah, you're not eligible for the Hall of Fame because, you're one win short or something like that, even though you have the all-time wins record in Big Ten history. That'd be an embarrassment to the Hall of Fame. But for what I know of him and what he has said, is he coaches because he absolutely loves it. And he loves working with people. He loves the game. He loves every aspect of it. And I know it's hard today, and I know nobody really wants to hear it. Once you remove the emotion from it and you watch it, and in some ways it was a little bit like Troy, in that what we saw was on defense anyway, was just, it's correctable if they put their mind to it. But overall, there's just, and offensively, I think they're improving. It's just, I thought it was quarterback that held them back the other day. There were open receivers in the first half. Cade McNamara missed them. He missed a lot of open receivers that would have changed the dynamic of the game. And that would have allowed Caleb Johnson to run freer, because they were just inching forward every single time at the snap. So I don't think the game has passed him by like some people want to think. And I've had these discussions even with people in my family, but I understand and can share the frustration of what's transpired.
What would it take on Saturday for Cade McNamara to be pulled out of the game? Because I don't think there's a shot in the world that we're going to see Brendan Sullivan take the first snap of the football game. What would it take for him to go out there and not be a red zone quarterback, to be the real quarterback for the Hawkeyes Saturday against the Wildcats?
For Cade to be left in Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
I honestly, of all these guys, I would say that Deacon was the worst that I'd seen, and he still stayed in there. Joe Labus, could not have been as bad, and yet they would refuse to play him over the years. And you just, so you've asked me that question a lot, when Spencer had struggled a lot in the past. I just don't see a scenario where Kirk does that unless the coaches all collectively say, we have to do this, and here's why. But if he didn't pull him after the first half, we're going 3-9. He's not going to pull him now, and he just.
That's Scott Dochterman from The Athletic, and that tells you a lot of the perspective and what we've seen at the quarterback position for Iowa football throughout the years. We continue. Let's take a look at the numbers. The stats for this Iowa football team. As you know, the offensive numbers, not very good. Defensively, though, some surprising numbers for this Iowa football team, and I think an eye-opener for a lot of you out there. We continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL fans, get the season going with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you want to do a little live betting, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Love having that information in front of you, and they got you covered at FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right. Get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet with FanDuel. The Hawkeyes this week, they're a 13.5-point favorite against Northwestern. You think the tide is changing, or is this another Ferentz special where he bounces back after an inexplicable loss? You can go either way at FanDuel. They got you covered there. They got props. They got in-game and a whole lot more. College, NFL, the World Series right around the corner, and a whole lot more. Find it all on the FanDuel Sportsbook. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet with FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com. Trent Condon back with you one final time here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. And as always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Wrapping things up here with a look at the Iowa football statistical profile. And offensively, it's rough. Iowa currently 102nd in the country. Now, that's a big improvement from where it was a year ago, averaging 346 yards per game, more than 100 yards more than what they did a season ago. But we're not talking about a real high hurdle. Rush offense, 17th in the country, though those numbers have dwindled down. Certainly the performance last week outside of the 75-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter from Caleb Johnson, just not a whole lot of running room against Michigan State. Iowa, pass offense, 128th in the country. Pass efficiency, that's got to be better. It is. It's still 110th. Brutal. Scoring offense, 74th. But then we get to the defense, and this is where the major concern is, because we've seen Iowa be able to win football games with just hideous offenses in the past. Well, the offense still isn't great by any means, but the defense is taking a major step back. Overall, total defense, 43rd in the country in total defense, giving up 337 yards per game. The rush defense, pretty good, 29th in the country. How about this, though? Iowa currently 83rd in the country in passing yards allowed per game at 225 per contest. How about the pass efficiency? Normally, you'll see Iowa from time to time. There's been some years where they give us some yards through the air, but the pass efficiency is good because they're picking off balls, they're making plays. Not the case this year. 81st in the country in pass efficiency defense. Scoring defense, 32nd in the country. That is brutal for the Iowa defense. How about getting off the field? Third down conversion defense, 34th. That's all right. Red zone defense, 118th. We've talked about this in the past. This has been a huge area of concern for this Iowa football team. It's ugly. And if the defense is not playing at an elite level, this has been a concern for a long time. How Phil Parker, not getting 5 stars every year, is he going to be able to maintain this high level of defense year in and year out? He's done a great job. And I still believe in Phil Parker that he hasn't forgot how to coach. They haven't been able to figure out the second corner spot. There's been disappointments along some of the veterans. Deontay Craig has got to the quarterback on a 2-point conversion. That's it. It's not been a great year. I will take a look at the PFF numbers, Pro Football Focus, from the game against Michigan State. They're not pretty for him. And not found the replacements that they needed from Joe Evans and Logan Lee on the defensive line from a year ago. It's been rough. It's been a rough season. Quinn Schulte has struggled at times this season. It does not look like you thought a 6-year senior was going to look in the back end of this defense. Offense, we know it's not pretty. The defense isn't good. Not playing at a high level, an elite level. You get a 4-3 football team. You are what your record says you are, right? Old Bill Parcells line. Iowa is a pretty average football team right now. A lot of intrigue. Mentioned we'll get those PFF numbers. Biz is going to be able to join us this week, at least he says, unless work gets in the way. We'll have that for you. Tom Kicker will join us as well later on this week. We got you covered. Your team every day, talking a lot of Iowa football, basketball right around the corner. We'll have plenty of that. We got a nationally ranked soccer team. I don't know how much we're going to touch on it, but we did right there. Congratulations to them. Your team every day in basketball, certainly going to be a big part of the conversation. Iowa also over the weekend had a secret scrimmage That wasn't very secret. We'll talk about that against Southern Illinois. We got you covered here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Hey, and don't forget, Craig Sheeman and company doing a great job with the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Craig, he always puts the Big Ten first, even when some people out there don't want to. You can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. 5-star review if you're listening in on the audio side. Greatly appreciate it. It helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.